Hello, welcome to my channel. It is very early in the morning, but I decided that if I didn't get this done now, I probably will never get this done because classes start for me very soon, and I have to both film and edit this video. But I've been sitting on this video concept. Of course, my AC decides to turn on right now. I've been working and sitting on this video for so long because a few months back, maybe, like probably when quarantine was like a few months in, I discovered this video through my recommended, and this piqued my interest. Let me tell you, there's a small community online that I kind of like stumbled into, and long story short, I discovered that there is this community online that is really devoted to this lost Broadway musical called Ragdolly, right? And so the premise of this musical is that it's set in the same universe as Raggedy Ann and Andy, like in the movie and like the books, you know, cute little dolls that come to life and they go on their own little adventures with this little camel guy. But very little was known about this Broadway musical because it kind of just fell into obscurity. It was such a massive fail, essentially, and parents absolutely hated it so much that it almost immediately failed and only really was semi-successful in Russia for a few years, as I understand it. There was a little documentary released on YouTube that's like 15 or 30 minutes long about that, called Ragdolly in the USSR. And then there were also some leaked demos of songs and even one whole recording of some of the songs as they went in chronological order in the musical. But the words were kind of muddled, like you couldn't really make out too much of what was happening. You're losing all the stage directions and all of that kind of stuff. So for the longest time, not much was known about this musical. It was kind of like pieced together by some of the lyrics of the demos and some of the information that was released at the time. Basically, this video is a response to this video, which I came across in my recommended. And this video is a much more organized and detailed account of like almost the entirety of what there is to know about Ragdolly and Raggedy Ann and Andy as like a franchise in general, because as you can see here, I've skipped forward a little bit because in the beginning he just talks about like the movies and the franchise a little bit and his history with it, but I don't want to have to sit through all that and force you guys through all that, but I've just skipped ahead a little bit, so we'll get to right into like the whole Ragdolly aspect of it. But the difference between this video, which I'm making right now, and his video, even though it is so well made and so well put together, is that he does not have the script. And sorry if I'm assuming, but I think that this person goes by he. Anyways, this person did not have the script to Ragdolly, but I was part of a Discord group chat with a mutual who was also really into this whole Ragdolly musical thing because it was interesting. It's like, I'm not gonna lie to you, it is super duper interesting and intense, but we didn't know the full extent of everything until we read the script. So right here in my tabs, if you peep those, if you want to zoom in on those real quick, I do have the Beastars manga, but don't look at that part. I don't want you to look there, that's not for you. But I do have a full summary of the Ragdoll script. I stayed up like all night one night because I just really like was inspired and I had to get going. This is 6 whole pages of a 2-act musical, just kind of condensed into 2 sections, which are stage direction and my personal notes, and then there's like random bullet points of like miscellaneous things as the musical goes on in chronological order. And then this tab is kind of like timestamps, rough timestamps of things I might want to talk about as a response to this video. So I'm nowhere near as organized as this YouTuber, but hopefully this will turn into a really cool video nonetheless. Here we go. You have the rundown now. Let's dive in.
1981, director Patricia Snyder approached Raposo to adapt the movie for stage. The first attempt was ideally for community theater or school productions. It was simply titled Raggedy Ann and Andy, because this version had all the songs cut. In 1984, however, playwright William Gibson, who was best known for writing The Miracle Worker, was brought on board. He wanted to tackle the story from an entirely different angle, focusing on the struggles that the real-life Marcella faced. The story now focused on the ill Marcella, who joined Raggedy Ann, Andy, and the other dolls on an adventure to cure her sickness while being stalked by supernatural villains.
So I don't know if he goes too into it in this video, but the real-life Marcella actually did end up becoming very ill and passing away, sadly. So
the show hit a bump in the road pretty quickly when premiered in December 1984 at the Empire State Institute for Performing Arts. Gibson had written a considerably darker interpretation of Raggedy Ann's adventures, and an outraged mother complained to the local news about how disturbing she found it.
it was a
As a
Karen.
result, a school that was planning to come for a matinee canceled their field trip. In January 1986, the show was performed in Moscow for an extended arrangement with the entire original cast along for the ride. Despite most of them having to cram in some quick Russian language lessons, and there being something of a language barrier when it came to set building and the orchestra, the show was a rousing success. Content. There's actually a decent amount of material for Raggedy Ann out there, luckily for us. In addition to demo recordings of the songs, there's also live audio recorded from one of the Broadway performances, and of course, the footage from the USSR documentary. Allegedly, there's more B-roll footage out there, and there's even rumored to be a taping of the entire show, but I can't find any real confirmation for this.
I've never even heard rumors of a taping of the show, but if someone has it, me and a certain Discord group chat would pay good money. I'm just saying.
The New York Public Library also has a relatively early draft of the script in its archives. I heard that one can purchase a PDF of the script, but when I personally wrote to them like half a year ago, I never heard back. What I'm saying is, we do at least have a good idea of how the show went. So here, for your pleasure, is a recap of Raggedy Ann's plot. There are a few points where I don't know what is going on based on the audio.
And I can fill those in, baby boy, don't you worry.
After an intro song by a Greek chorus, we meet Marcella, who has faced a lot of losses in her short life.
This is
Her
true.
mother has abandoned her and her father when she was very young, for a rat in a Rolls Royce, as her father put it. Her father has become an alcoholic, and her pet canary was eaten by her dog.
So, I think we're gonna pause right here because I want to just tell you a little bit about some of the stage direction so we really get a good feel for this real quick. All right, Act 1, scene direction. A Raggedy Ann doll in the spotlight. Shapes and people move mysteriously and build the exterior of a shack. And then my personal note is the song Overture likely plays at this time since it's likely to come before the songs Rags, Buttons, and Gingham, which comes right after, but it's not like explicitly written out in the script, and it's not explicitly named Overture in the script, but I also have downloads of each of the songs, and this seems to be the opening one with like the big band sound, and it's most likely them when they're building this shack. Is what I've concluded. And the opening sequence is Rags, Buttons, and Gingham, and they describe it as a tipsy shack. There's a full moon rising in the rear. So I believe that the stage for this show must have been pretty cool because I think that the full moon was actually like some sort of digital thing, or maybe there was like a projector onto it, but that'll come into play later, just remember that. And then it says that the wall is pulled open to reveal the inside, and Marcella's room is decorated with symbolic objects pertinent to their journey. There's a goldfish bowl, there's an empty bird cage, and there's a map on her wall. So already, like just from the scene and like the stage directions, it sounds dope as hell. It sounds kind of like a dollhouse type aesthetic where they open the shack wall. And the symbolic elements in the room already. And then my personal note is that this kind of is like a grim way of revealing the plot because in the number they say the line, "For hearts need mending, they always do," kind of implying Marcella's heart is going to need some mending, if you know what I mean. So then the stage direction is that Marcella has 3 thermometers in her mouth, and there are doctors all around her. Her father sits in a corner taking swigs from a bottle. So yeah, the alcoholism is definitely noted. And then the doctors kind of argue a little bit about her prognosis. Marcella reveals that she's scared of the door in the closet in her room because of trauma from losing those who go through it, such as her mom, dog, and bird, which he talked about a little bit there. And then the dad eventually is like really upset because the doctors just are like arguing over how sick she is, essentially, and he chases them off and tries to comfort Marcella. Marcella thinks that she can hear her dead bird tweeting, and her dad says that that's just her head and that she's singing in a Methodist choir in heaven. So the subject of heaven is brought up. I'll finish this paragraph. Okay, so the subject of heaven is brought up, and they talk a little bit about Marcella's mom. Marcella seems to be kind of pessimistic, her general attitude, and so her dad keeps telling her, you know, nice little white lies to make her feel better. Like, he mentioned that she had run away with a rat in a Rolls Royce, but he also makes it a point to say that mommy might go to heaven because she danced across their life like a star. I think that this kind of plays into some symbolism as well, because later on we'll see how the mom is kind of symbolized by the star. That's like her motif. And there's also a baby shoe. Like, the baby shoe is symbolic of like the relationship of Marcella and her mom. Okay, back to this.
And choked to death. The dog is named Red Fang, and her bird has the unfortunate name of Yellow Yum Yum, which is probably the silliest name for a bird I've ever heard, and my sister's childhood friend had a parrot named Thermometer Jones. I'm only bothering to mention Red Fang and Yellow Yum Yum by name because they're actually somewhat important later on. That night, when Marcella goes to sleep, Raggedy Ann comes to life.
Alright, so he brushes over a few more crucial details, so let's go back to our notes. Before Raggedy Ann comes alive, right, and before he makes the doll, Marcella asks her dad if she'll die tonight. She says, "My heart is cold." He says, "So's mine, chick." And he brings her a doll and names her Raggedy Ann. And then he makes her a candy heart, and he puts it on her, and it says, "I love you," and he has Marcella read it out loud, and when she does, he says, "Same here," and that becomes another kind of like theme or like repetitive thing throughout the play, so pay attention to that. And then he gives a heart to Raggedy Ann and then leaves him with Marcella, and then he explains to her that at night she has to rest because that's the only way to make the dolls come alive. And so this is kind of done through the song Carry On. Carry On is sung as a lullaby and an explanation of how the dolls come alive. And then after Marcella falls asleep, there's a stage direction that Anne falls out of her hand. Behind the bed, off stage, the doll falls out of her hand because she falls asleep. And then her dad kisses her, lurches out to stare at the moon and shout at the sky drunkenly, basically yelling at God and begging for his daughter to live. He says, "I'll pull your beard out by the fistful." Stage direction, he stumbles off, implied drunkenly, and Marcella is left alone in her cot. Stage direction, there's magical music and a lump under the covers. Suddenly a female leg appears and Anne claws her way out. So we are once again caught up with the video. But I can imagine this, I had a personal note because I can imagine this kind of happening in a similar fashion as like a zombie rising up, but it's like a doll.
Of Raggedy Ann is less generically sweet than her movie counterpart, and is actually pretty in your face and somewhat sarcastic at times.
This is true.
I personally kind of like the change. Marcella explains that she's bedridden because she's dying. All the doctors say so. On cue, the 3 doctors from before pop in, this time dressed as clowns.
They sing a song called Diagnosis. It's a grim but upbeat song about how Marcella has so many medical maladies, she's guaranteed to die. And then they say that they must report back to General D. Hey, well, we're gonna cut that. Okay.
Of course, this whole thing is Marcella's fever dream. Anne doesn't buy that Marcella is really dying, thinking this is all in the little girl's mind. She goes on to say that this is Marcella's dream, and they can do anything here. Marcella wants to see Yellow Yum Yum. Raggedy Ann suggests finding Marcella's mother, but Marcella doesn't like that idea. To rouse Marcella out of bed, Raggedy Ann calls on her brother and her friends.
There's this little bit that I made into a comic that I might include here. And then after basically that happens, there is a song that starts called The Light. And it's basically started by a light illuminating a toy box, which Andy pops out of. Then the rest of the gang join in on the song, but they kind of seem to all pop up one after another from this like seemingly endless toy box, you know, kind of clown car fashion, but like the opposite. Another thing I will say about this musical is that it has the side character. The additional characters are not good. There's a baby doll and there's a panda doll. Panda doll is really stereotypically like Chinese, like racist. And the baby doll is just plain annoying, but I guess it's important for the plot later and like symbolism or whatever. But the panda could be completely replaced with someone like, oh, I don't know, Babette, the badass. Like, look at her. There's some time wasted caring for the baby doll, including Andy finding a bottle for her. And it is a fifth of Jack Daniels. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, it is a fifth of Jack Daniels. You can't make this stuff up. Then Andy wonders about the closet door, and Marcella is like severely triggered. She's like really scared. She's like, don't open that door. And because he is such a troubled young lad, he decides to open it anyways because he's not scared of no little girl, and in doing so he summons General D. And so then there's a stage direction. A large shadow looms on the cyclorama, so I'm guessing that the cyclorama is the moon projector thing, so maybe there's like a large shadow against the moon. A catastrophe follows: roaring wind and red smoke, thunder, and the moon goes red. The shack is blown to pieces, which fly about, and everyone hides in/around the bed. When the smoke clears, the sky is full of bat wings. General D stands at the door with a bat in front of him, screeching. The bat is just like a girl in a outfit, let's be honest here. The wolf is on a leash, snapping his fangs, and General D is described as enormous, and as if he just crawled from the grave, in tatters and with an eye patch, and he has a limp and drags his leg.
Panda emerges last. Baby Doll and Panda, despite being on stage for a good amount of time, don't have too much of their personalities, serving mostly as one-note joke characters. Baby Doll makes a few jokes about needing a new diaper, and Panda speaks in a stereotypical Asian dialect, spouting mock Confucius wisdom. While I'll defend most of this show, they probably should have known better for that part, which Marcella is afraid to open, although she won't say why.
She does say why. It's because everyone she loves who passed through the door has also passed away.
Raggedy Andy, he opens the door to reveal the show's villain, General D, which stands for darkness, decay, disillusion,
like,
and
look at
done
him.
For. He commands the army of the dead and
Look
wants
at
to
him.
add Marcella to his ranks. With him are his henchmen. General D also acts slightly flirtatious with
These
Marcella,
are the outfits,
too,
everyone.
even when the bat
And
points
there's
out
my
that she's
AC
1
again.
billionth his age. P departs, promising to be back at 6 the next morning for Marcella and the dolls. In a strange scene transition that I can't quite figure out the logistics of, the clown doctors reappear, once again singing their diagnosis song.
Okay, so I will say he seems to be commenting on a later version of the show. The script seems to be on an earlier version of the musical, so this transition goes a little bit differently in the different versions for whatever reason. They both essentially have the same thing, but I think one of the songs is cut, but it doesn't end up really making so much of a difference. It's just things are the same, but not necessarily in the same chronological order. So I'll tell you what I mean right now. He's implied to be a cannibal because he says he wants to cook Andy with an apple in his mouth. Panda seems to be able to see his past lives of the general because he's like Asian, I guess. Anyways, he says his past life, one of them was a fish. Keep that in mind. And Anne says this incredible line I've included. She says, "Me, I'm just make-believe. I'm just here to make believe that things are better than they are." Come on, a gem. Are you kidding me? Stunning. He kind of like yeets away with a smoke bomb, so that's the chaos that you heard. Guy in the YouTube video. Sorry if you didn't say your name. My name's Asher if you want to make a video response to my video response. General D throws down a smoke bomb, and the dolls kind of just conclude it was all some illusion. But they somehow end up in the Miami shipyards, likely teleported by General D. It's where the old dolls go to die, or so they're told by workers who are there at the dump after they dump the camel. So this is where we're introduced to the camel doll. They discover that Anne comes to the conclusion that they have to actually take this seriously, because she realizes that if they're make-believe and they don't exist without Marcella, then if Marcella really does kick the bucket tonight, then they all die. So they're like, oh shit, things are on the line for me now. So they decide to take her to the only doctor Marcella hasn't seen, the doll doctor in LA. And they decide that the quickest way to get there would be sailing. And so Andy turns the bed into a sailboat during a song sequence called Mexico. This song was also cut. It wasn't that racist. Like, it's actually kind of a bop. I do listen to it from time and time. I mean, like I said, they did change up the sequence a little bit. So right after the song Mexico, the camel sings his song Blue, which is one of the original songs from the Raggedy Ann and Andy movie. I have a personal note here that Andy has just amazing lines in this musical, just great lines. One of them is, "I'm not so bad. I'm just an underprivileged boy, frustrated by lack of opportunity to do good." This sounds like something that I've said exactly, like, in my life. Like, Andy, why are we the same person? General D taunts them as a voice from the sky, and Marcella is upset and wants her mommy, or anyone really. She says if she had one wish, it would be for her parents to be married again. General D returns as a fish suddenly, because they're sailing. So he returns as a fish, and he tells them that their fortune is poor when they, I guess, throw him a penny. Anne swings, I guess, with like an oar and misses, and so she falls overboard, but she's caught by a friendship chain, so they pull her back on board. But then General D kicks it up a notch with lightning. Lightning flashes, and the stars go out. The mast breaks. So then the dolls resolve to make the bed into a plane with flapping sheet wings. They lift it up in the air and sing the song Quiet Night, parentheses, Quintet. So, personal note, this is kind of like a prelude to the song Something in the Air, or at least that's what it's listed in my like downloaded music. But in the script it's listed as Quiet Night. So then Marcella asks if they're in heaven because they make their way into the clouds, and Anne says that it's just a piece of it. The clouds joyously sing to welcome them. The moon tells the sun to get out of his sky because it's the night. The sun rebuttals with, "You're just a mere reflection of me." Personal note, this could be symbolic of maybe the dad and the other man that the wife ran off with. I'm not entirely sure. I don't see how his timeline differs from mine.
And suddenly, everyone is in a Miami shipyard dump. Not sure what happened there, but it's implied that General D had something to do with it.
He worked
They
his
meet
magic.
the abandoned camel with the wrinkle immediately launches into Blue. While the song doesn't have a lot to do with the plot, it at least fits into the theme of the story. Marcella and the camel are both dealing with abandonment. It's mostly the same as the movie version, just shorter and with Raggedy Ann joining in on the final verse.
How can you be anything but low down, saggy and blue, sad but true?
They decide to go to the doll doctor, who's located in Los Angeles. They turn Marcella's bed into a boat, while singing a song called Make Believe. It was originally written as a different number about stopping by Mexico on their way to LA. They made the right choice by changing it. The camel asks to come along and expresses his desire to be an opera singer. They sail on their boat and are almost immediately attacked by General D. Somehow they escape and fly into the sky. Soon our heroes find themselves in what is described as a piece of heaven, where everyone is holding hula hoop-like things for some reason.
There's supposed to be
In a demo version of
clouds.
the song, they see the sun and moon get into a verbal altercation, although this isn't in the Broadway audio. Marcella is told that this is where wishes come true, and she wishes to see Yellow Yum Yum again. The bird appears, singing in a heavenly choir and reciting a rather morbid little poem. Next, Marcella wishes to see her father and mother again, and for them to love each other and be a family again. Her wish is granted, and the three of them stand united for one fleeting second. However, as the musical sequence ends, the mother breaks away, saying that Marcella and her father are a rope around her neck. The parents disappear.
Yeah, this is all pretty accurate and pretty much the same as what I have, I think. She's told she gets 3 wishes. So she wishes to see her dead bird again, she wishes her papa could see, and then she wishes that they could be married again. The symbolism of her mom as the shooting star is brought up again as a motif during the song, because this is all done throughout the song, Quiet Night. And so there are like these overlapping harmonies towards the end, and her mom has this shooting star motif, where she's like, whoosh left, whoosh right, catch me, I'm a shooting star, or something like that. And then it's a Pachelbel canon type wedding sequence type deal. And then the mom stops, screams, calls them the rope around her neck, and then everyone turns and runs off in a panic.
Marcella is understandably crushed and vows to never forgive her mother. Raggedy Ann tries to lift her spirits, but isn't able to help that much. Raggedy does what everyone at a loss for words does in a musical. She sings. Belting out a variation of Rag Dolly from the original movie with new lyrics, Raggedy Ann promises to do all she can to help Marcella get to the doll doctor. And to the credit of Ivy Austin, she really gives it her all.
So let me tell you something that we didn't know until we got our greasy little mitts on the script. This scene isn't Ivy Austin just being really passionate. This is actually Raggedy Ann having enough of Marcella's bull and just completely not turning on her, but just completely being like, well, what do you expect? I am a doll. There's only so much I can do. Marcella has a full breakdown about her trauma. She recognizes that life isn't only good stories and that there's so many bad ones too. Her pessimism is challenged by Anne's constant optimism until Anne herself had enough. So here's the altercation, all right? I wrote it down. So Marcella goes, "You're just rags and buttons. Who do you think you are?" So then Anne goes, "I don't know. Who do I think I am?" And then it breaks out into a salty rendition of Rag Dolly. And so it's not really like as heartwarming as you thought of her like trying to cheer her up. It's more so like, hey, I'm a doll. I can't cure your cancer. I'm joking, she didn't have cancer. But yeah, then she has a second wind of optimism and then things kind of pick up from there.
General D somehow brings them crashing down to Earth, possibly with the help of the Bat, and that ends Act 1.
So the Bat comes back and she chews through the rope, which I'm assuming was holding up the blanket mast thing that they were flying through the air with, or something like that. Yeah, so they fall out of the sky, and then the stage directions say that like a bunch of people come in and with like different letter cards spell out the word thunk with an exclamation point. And that's the end of Act 1, everybody. Act 2, the ensemble is pointing at an eerie moon, and there is a Rags, Buttons, etc. reprise song. Stage direction, the cast is on a moonlit rooftop with the bed half buried at an angle. Panda hangs over the mast and the other dolls are strewn about. The Bat is polishing her toenails as the wolf scouts the doll. They have banter. The wolf is into the Bat, but the Bat wants General D. You might even say she wants the D. But the dolls find out that they're in Omaha, Nebraska at this point. The Bat tries to seduce Andy and then sings a song called Never Get Away, which is basically her bragging about her success in like killing people or something and how they never get away, but like weird flex, I guess. And then there's a dance number. I think it might be a tap number, but I'm not explicitly sure. Bat reveals that she's not into the wolf's advances because he ate her, revealing that she was Yellow Yum Yum, the dead canary all along. But the thing is that they don't remember, but Marcella does. So when Marcella tries to reconnect with them, they're like, I don't know who you are. And so Marcella starts to cry, and the Bat tells her. The Bat only makes things worse by telling her that she eats little girls like her. Guess everybody in this musical is a cannibal now. Stage direction, a soft but showy explosion. General D appears in a butcher's apron and maybe blood-flecked chef's hat. What does that mean? Maybe blood-flecked? He's nibbling on a thigh bone and he says that it's Chinese specialty to the panda. So, clearly if they were to remake this musical, they'd have to rework some of these parts here, but then he goes on to say that he brings about peace and silence, and that then he shows off his ring where he shows the entire world around them. Personal note, I think that the moon has been modified to look like an eye with the projector thing, because the stage notes say that it looks like an eye, and he says that he gave up an eye for the ring to see all. He says that he's the doll doctor, and that at the end they're all animals to the slaughter or something, and then he goes, listen, the animals to be slaughtered. And then there's mooing and shrieking animals. This is a musical that is marketed for kids. You can understand why Karens were upset at this point. I think in the Broadway bootleg you can actually hear like children screaming and crying at this point.
Act 2 opens with the actors having landed in Omaha, Nebraska, called that the Bat and the Wolf were Yellow Yum Yum and Red Fang in their previous lives.
Yes.
I legitimately wasn't expecting that. The Bat suddenly turns her attention to Andy and bursts into a pretty fantastic showgirl-style number called You'll Love It.
It's actually called You'll Never Get Away, but...
Once again, General D enters, and based on the dialogue, it sounds like the characters are now trapped in a slaughterhouse of sorts. He shows off his magic ring, which can see everything. He also reveals that he wants Marcella to be his Queen of the Dead. The Bat is incredibly unhappy with this creepy development. The dolls are left trapped, guarded by General D. Raggedy Ann suggests singing the General to sleep, which leads into the incredibly catchy song, A Little Music.
Little tune.
The camel, in an effort to prove he's not so useless after
I love
all,
these drawings, by
steps
the way.
forth
Did you make
and
these?
belts out a mock operatic
Great.
aria, which indeed ends up putting General D to sleep. She declares her love for General D, to the wolf's dismay. General D kills the Bat, leaving the wolf to howl mournfully over her death.
So, it's kind of unclear if he kills her, actually, because I think that it's explained as, like, the Bat is thrown into a pit. So, I'm not sure why she couldn't just, like, fly out of the pit as a bat, but, I mean, hey, that's, it's fine. It's all good. So then there's a disaster song called Gone. I wonder if the same thing happens in his version. Let's see.
Despite having the magic ring in their possession, the dolls all get lost in the Grizzly Woods,
Yep.
which, according to reviews, were decorated with skeletons.
Yes, they
A
were.
new character is introduced.
There are, in fact, skeletons.
She is considering hanging herself. Raggedy Ann stumbles upon the witch, and also a baby shoe that the witch has, which appears to stir up some bad memories. Marcella and Raggedy Ann reunite, while the witch tries to figure out how to tie a proper noose. The other dolls arrive, and the witch is particularly taken with the baby doll, asking...
So I'm gonna go into this part a little bit more detailed for y'all, because it is a little bit deep here. It do be getting deep though. Yeah, so as the song Gone ends, there's a witch that is trying to tie a noose, and Anne kind of encounters her. She's like, hey, do you know the way out of these woods? And then the witch is like, hey, do you know how to tie a noose? Because Anne is kind of like a little bit more naive, she doesn't exactly realize that she's trying to kill herself right away. So they're just kind of talking, and the witch is like disgusted by the baby shoe. She says that babies make her sick. And then as Marcella is reunited with Anne, they hug, and the witch just continues to ask them if they know how to tie specific knots, does not recognize Marcella, does not recognize Anne, but she's just like, hey, I don't care about none of y'all, can y'all help me tie a knot, please? I need to die. And then Anne has this weird feeling that the witch is a mother, and the dolls finally start realizing that she is trying to kill herself because Andy and like the panda are there. And then so they stop and they try to comfort her, when suddenly the baby doll comes in and the witch completely does a 180, ignores them, and immediately is taken by the baby. She throws the noose down and she asks the baby to call her mama, and the baby says mama, and then she keeps asking it to call her mama, and then the baby's like, this is getting weird, and she starts to sing What Did I Lose, in which she expresses remorse for leaving her baby, who just so happened to have been named Marcella. So then all the dots start connecting, and Marcella realizes that the witch is her mom. They reveal that they've missed each other, but Marcella still feels an understandable anger towards her. The witch is like apologizing and stuff, and she's like, I kept the baby shoe and I've loved this shoe, and so Marcella bursts out and says, I'm not a shoe, I'm a girl. And she asks why her mother left, and her mother revealed that it was just too much. She says, I couldn't breathe. Her mom begs for forgiveness, and there's a pause, but Marcella decides to forgive her mother at the end of the day. Suddenly, the wolf appears and scares everyone off in all different directions, and they somehow end up in LA anyways.
She realizes that she threw a perfectly good life away on a cheap fling. Seriously, this is a great song. If the show had done better, I can see this being covered by multiple artists.
It's
for
a
compilation
beautiful
albums.
song. Like, it's amazing, and it's great.
When did I lose thee?
I'm trying so hard not to sing along.
When did the highlight so low? And how did I go so low? What did I throw away for what I thought was glory? The story.
Marcella and her mother have an emotional reunion where the mother confesses that abandoning her family was the worst decision she ever could have made. Marcella forgives her. Suddenly, something happens, although it's hard to tell what based on the audio alone, and everyone is once again separated. The wolf appears.
So yeah, the reason why these like transition scenes seem so chaotic in the like just listening to like the audio bootlegs is because they are just chaotic. Like for no reason, the dolls are just kind of like, let's all run around in circles, and then they somehow end up in LA anyways. But I don't know.
Although he says he's not working for General D anymore. Not after he killed the bat. I think he kills the mother anyway, though, whose last words are her declaring her love for her daughter. Suddenly, we're at the doll hospital.
He just
where
kind of
the
chases
nurses
them, I
perform
think.
a lounge number. The dolls and Marcella are all reunited. The clown doctors are there, but they claim that the doll doctor is dead. General D emerges from a trapdoor and announces that the wolf is dead, killed for independent thinking. Launches into his own villain song, the supremely creepy I Come Riding.
So the song is called He Comes Riding. Before that, there are two songs. The first, I believe he describes it as like a lounge number. Is that what he said? The first song that he describes as Welcome to LA is actually unnamed in the script, so I just listed it as unnamed. And so is the Diagnosis Reprise / Welcome to LA, which I also listed as unnamed because it doesn't have an actual name in the script. But basically, there's this nice, cute little like stage direction here that I'll read aloud because I just think it would be like visually it sounds really appealing. So there's toy beds all lined up and colored paper lanterns like Christmas lights. 3 nurses with thermometers and syringes are going down the lines of beds, giving shots and taking temperatures as they sing. So I can imagine this like, you know, they're like singing songs and they're like each going down and like turning, or like, you know how it's like, you know, you get the gist, you get it. You're a smart person. I believe in you. I feel like you can understand these things. You get me. Right, so everyone is glad to be safe except Anne, who's weeping with guilt because she couldn't stand by Marcella's side. But they're like, hey, you're here now, everybody's okay. 3 doctors march in, begin to inspect her mouth. The nurses start to sing again and spits out the thermometer and gets them to focus on Marcella instead. Then they demand to see the doll doctor. They're informed that he's dead. Marcella falls to her knees, but they realize that he's not dead by looking through the ring. They can see him and he looks roughed up, but he's in the cellar. As he tosses him down a hatch, and then he says it was his hospital before singing He Comes Riding. And then Marcella makes her way to him and asks if she can at least say goodbye. And as he gets the ring from near Raggedy Ann's heart, the love, so like the love heart, as his hand touches it, the love is poison to him, and it hurts him, so he falls to the ground, kicking and writhing, and so they tie him up. They make it to the cellar and find the doll doctor, who's chained up with a nurse, and they have some banter about his drinking problem. The nurse and him have this kind of banter where the nurse says, "You're dying." He says, "Who's dying?" And then the nurse goes, "Everybody." Everybody's dying. Every day. So then the gang find him and free him. Camel falls down the stairs. They rush to inspect him.
Power of Love registered trademark against General D and tie him up. The general warns he won't be stopped for long. The real doll doctor arrives, revealed to be Marcella's father, and says Raggedy Ann has the cure for Marcella's broken heart. Raggedy Ann's own candy heart. In an act of love, Raggedy Ann sacrifices her own heart to save Marcella. The next morning, Marcella is awake and completely cured. Her father tells her she dreamed the whole thing, but Marcella isn't so sure. Her Raggedy Ann doll's heart is missing. The father assures Marcella, and by extension the audience, that he'll make Raggedy Ann a new heart and she'll be just fine. So that covers the plot. The whole thing's been described as being very Freudian, and I can see that. It's a really interesting show. Like, going into this, I knew it was going to be really strange, but I hadn't counted on how deep the script actually got.
Oh, honey, it
The
gets
thing
so
is, despite
deep.
Raggedy Ann being the focus, it's not really her story, it's Marcella's. The poor girl desperately wants to know what she did wrong to send her mother away, and it's heartbreaking. Literally, in Marcella's case. The whole thing is about her having to forgive her mother, which she does, but it's even deeper than that. If we take this story as nothing more than a fever dream, no magical singing dolls actually existing, that means that Marcella imagined all of this herself and forgave an imaginary, truly remorseful version of her mother that didn't really exist. For all we know, Marcella's real mother doesn't care about the family she abandoned. But in order to move on and keep living her life, Marcella had to construct this elaborate fantasy just to let go. I swear, students could write entire essays on this show if it was better known. Yes, it has a few flaws. The humor didn't quite always hit its mark. The stuff with General D trying to marry Marcella was probably creepier than originally intended, and I wish the racial stuff with the panda was handled a bit better. But overall, it was solid. So why didn't it work? Broadway. I'm not saying there's no...
That's not why it
for
didn't
experimental
work. It
theater
didn't
on
work
Broadway.
because of this, like,
Cats
intense
isn't exactly a
suicide
conventional show,
being marketed
but
to
for one reason or another, it ran
kids.
forever. Now and forever. But Raggedy Ann just couldn't find the right audience, and some of it was because it was too
That's
out
the
there for an
issue, I
average
think.
patron. The show had a kid-oriented premise at a glance about, dolls helping a sick child, and that would turn off most adults without kids. But then the show had all this crazy dark material that might upset some children, and their paying parents even more, like that woman who complained when the show was in its testing phase in 1984. William Gibson once said in response to the negative feedback, "The style is for children, the content is for me." And I respect that, Mr. Gibson, I really do.
I also
But
really
I don't
respect
think the
that,
Great
because
White
that's a
Way was
fucking
the proper
aesthetic.
name for the show with that in mind. Critics were not kind to the show either, comparing it unfavorably to The Wizard of Oz and Peter Pan. They generally liked Raposo's score, but not much else. But an uncertain audience and negative critics aside, I think the show does still have a lot of potential. I can see it being done in colleges or even community theaters.
If anything, I wouldn't compare this to, like, The Wizard of Oz or something like that. If anything, lately what I would compare this to is Over the Garden Wall. Because you know how in Over the Garden Wall, spoilers if you haven't seen Over the Garden Wall, which by this point, come on now, it came out, 2014? Get to it. But basically the whole plot for Over the Garden Wall is two children dealing with death, essentially. Like, it's revealed in the second to last episode, or the last episode, I don't remember, that they're just ordinary kids, but they avoided getting hit by a train and fell into a freezing cold lake and, had to be fished out and, brought into the ambulance. But it kind of shows how, in like a childlike way, the manifestations of children who are not yet ready to die or fighting for their lives, and in Over the Garden Wall, it was Greg fighting to not become an Idlewood tree, and in here, it's Marcella fighting to not be taken by General D, so it's kind of like this same parallel, rather than like The Wizard of Oz. I can't see The Wizard of Oz being, what's her name, trying to not die. It's more so like, maybe growing up, maybe it's about growing up, or like not always getting what you want, or something. The themes are different.
The script is really fascinating, and I think it could have a second life if given the chance. Before we finish, I want to talk a little about a few cast members of the show. Hopefully someday, more people will truly appreciate this imaginative, fascinating show. Until then, we have a decent amount of material for this musical. Even if it didn't fare well on Broadway itself, it has a place in our candy hearts.
So yeah, I think my takeaway is really, really, really awesome job for this video. Colin looks back. Oh, maybe I want to like read you a little bit more about how the end goes, because he didn't go into too much detail. It is really great because like the way it pans out. So I'm gonna just read my notes to you. The camel insists that the doll doctor look at Marcella first. He doesn't really want to examine her at first because he's not a person doctor, he's a doll doctor. But he gives in anyways, and then he concludes that her heart is broken, but he calls her kid. Marcella catches on and realizes that it's her dad, and he takes off his surgical mask, and it's like this big reveal. And so then Anne sacrifices her candy heart for Marcella to live, and General D has to take Anne instead. And so as Anne is being taken away by General D, Marcella cries out, "Don't go, I love you." And Anne goes, "Same here." The shack is rebuilt. Papa leads her to her cot, where they continue, as if Marcella was recounting it all to him. He teases her about eating the heart in her sleep and agrees to make her another so she'll be good as new. At the end, Anne pops up and winks to the audience after the last ensemble piece, Gingham and Yarn reprise. I think that some of like the core elements here were like symbolism about Marcella's like trauma. Ultimately, this is a trauma story, and ultimately this is also a child dying story, and like a child's last closure, I guess, their way of coping with something that's too much for them to handle. And so as somebody who has been through a lot of shit myself, I could really relate, and I think that this play would be really good if it was fixed a lot, you know? Maybe in the future that could be our next project, is like revamping this musical and making it like 10 times better or something. But yeah, now hopefully you have a more well-rounded look at this musical, and hopefully it doesn't just die off. But I've been into this since like 2015 or something, so like it's been going strong 5 years or something. So again, I really enjoyed making this video response. I really enjoyed looking at this really beautifully crafted video by Colin Looks Back. I really encourage you watch this in its entirety. It's called Looking Back on the Raggedy Ann Musical, parentheses, on screen and stage. And yeah, like I said, it's super duper interesting. I'm super duper into Raggedy Ann and Andy, and like Monroe, Connecticut is where the haunted Raggedy Ann doll Annabelle is, and so she is, I shit you not, like maybe 30 minutes away from my current location. So like, not to flex or anything, but if I wanted to, I could go visit her. Anyways, I don't really have anything much more to say on this, but be sure to like and subscribe and comment and check this guy's video out, and feel free to check out more of my videos. They're not really, there's no theme to my channel, like it's miscellaneous. I got whatever you need. I got vlogs, I got ASMR, I got cooking videos, I got me having a mental breakdown and doing my makeup and spiraling. And hopefully soon I'll have more content up, but who knows, because I'm gonna be starting school soon. So have a nice day.